Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the 2020 Virginia Cutler Lecture. I realize I've just taken you back in time. This lecture was scheduled to be given last October, but we made the decision back then to postpone, hoping that we would have at least what we have tonight, the opportunity to have some of our students and faculty here in person to hear Dr. Duncan. So again, welcome. We're glad that you're here. A special welcome to family and friends of Virginia Cutler and all those who were instrumental in setting up this wonderful enduring endowment that sponsors this lecture and other activities. We're also grateful to the family and special friends of Dr. Steve Duncan, who are joining us remotely via Zoom, following BYU current policy that we ask those who are not current students or faculty or staff not to come on campus. But we're very glad that you are here and welcome you and look forward to another time when we can speak to you in person. I'd like to also welcome Associate Dean Sam Otterstrom from the College of Family, Health, and Social Sciences, who is here representing the college tonight. And also want to acknowledge the help that we've received from Bruce Bergen and Maddie Gillette, handling technical matters for the lecture tonight. And a special thank you to Laurel Bishop from the School of Family Life and all of the logistical work that she has done to make this event a success. And I probably missed some other staff from the school and from the college who have been involved. Now I want to welcome the students, the faculty, and staff who are here tonight and who are watching with us via Zoom to this lecture. Very happy that you are joining us here tonight, and think this will be time very well spent for you. We'll begin our evening tonight with an invocation from Dr. Aaron Holmes.
Our dear Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunity we have to gather together and to listen to Dr. Duncan. We're grateful for the service he's rendered to families throughout the United States and around the globe through his research and his other family life education efforts. We pray that will be with him, that he will feel thy love and support, and that he will be able to remember all those things he's prepared well for us tonight, and present this material well to us. We pray that will continue to be with each of us throughout this semester. Bless us with strength and courage and motivation to continue to work hard despite this pandemic. And we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Dr. Stephen F. Duncan graduated with his PhD from Purdue University in Indiana in 1988 and accepted a position after that on the faculty of Auburn University in Alabama, where he was a family life and human development extension, family life specialist there in the Cooperative Extension Service at Auburn University. A few years after that, in 1993, he transferred to Montana State University in a similar position there. And then we were able to lure him away in 2000, so more than 20 years ago, to come to BYU and lead some unique efforts around family outreach here at BYU. Throughout his career and through his 20+ years here at BYU, his efforts have been focused around strengthening marriage and families through family life education outreach. He's the author of the leading textbook in family life education, and you will see a number of his outreach projects presented tonight in his presentation. And Dr. Duncan has helped many students over the years launch their own avocation and vocation to be gifted family life educators in their congregations, in their communities, and in their various career activities. And it's been my privilege to work on a number of things with Dr. Duncan over these years. And welcome him, and we look forward to your presentations.
I'm so delighted to be with all of you tonight. It's a rip-roaring blast, actually. It's been a blast to prepare remarks that I have for you. But you know, I didn't always want to be a family life educator, and this remote is not working. Oh, the first foul up.
Get your click on the screen.
Yeah. Initially, I wanted to be a professional drummer. And this picture was taken Christmas morning in 1965. And my mom was very generous and got me a drum set and my just older brother Dan, guitar and an amplifier. And he and I made wonderful music together as the Duncan brothers. And then later on, we became the Jaguars when we added some members to our band. So given my life experience, it's no wonder that I really wanted to be a professional musician, drummer, and that's what I ended up majoring in when I went to the University of Utah, that being jazz improvisation. But a mission changed all that. There was something about the missionary service in the Japan Fukuoka mission that transformed my career paths, my orientation. And I came home thinking that I wanted to do anything and all things family, particularly marriage, not just to marry my own partner, but also to be involved. And so I read books without number, David Mace books, Harold Bowman books, Marriage for Moderns, anything that summarized family sociology findings, particularly about marriage. When I gave talks at the university as part of classes, it would be about marriage preparation. Even though I was not a family science person yet, I was attending institute, learning what I could through those various vehicles. But I just loved the summarization of all things marriage, all things family, and then things that you and I could take home and have dinner table conversations about and wow our dates with, because we were so knowledgeable about some of these things. When I came to BYU after graduating from the University of Utah with a degree in speech communication education and music education as a minor, I bumped into these three people while I was here, and going from left to right is Terry Olson, Bob Stallman, and then Joel Moss. Terry was the first person who said family life education in a row, those three words, first time I'd ever heard them articulated by man or woman. And I went over to talk to the counseling center because I was still interested in being a therapist. And so I chewed the fat a little bit with Bob Stallman, who happened to be department chair at that time. But he said, you know, you could be a therapist, but you ought to do the general family life education thing first. And Joel Moss, who went to the far right, a very young picture of Joel, he became my major professor. And I got to know Joel really well. So I graduated with a master's here from BYU with an emphasis in family life education. Then I went to Purdue University to do a doctorate in family studies. While I was there, Judy Myers-Walls, who's pictured on the left there, yes, it's your left. On the left there, she happened to be on pregnancy leave. And so I kind of took her job, taking university ideas out to the people. I did the writing. And Dina Targ on her right was my supervisor, also an extension person. And she taught me for the very first time to think of the phrase, take the university to the people. A lot of people don't come to a university, or once they leave a university, that's the last time they leave it. Or some never come to a university, ever darkening the halls of a university by being present and being wonderful with us. And so they mentored me in this idea of outreach, taking the university to the people. Therefore, it was sort of a circuitous journey that I took, path, so to speak, and from a music-oriented person, putting that in more of an avocational framework. I'm still a drummer, I still love drums. I'm pretty good at it too, even I'll play with some synthesis guys on occasion, which says more about them than me. I'm the old guy amongst them. But I graduated from Purdue with family studies and took my first job, as Dr. Hawkins had mentioned, at Auburn University as a family and child development specialist and assistant professor there at Auburn. So I went from a child drummer to a family life professor. Well, once I got hired here at BYU, soon after that, I came to a conference here at BYU that was about revitalizing marriage. It was organized by the brother who introduced this evening tonight, Dr. Hawkins. And I came there to present about marriage preparation and how to expand, again, marriage prep, how to expand the reach of marriage preparation opportunities around the world. And while I was driving my car up to campus, I saw this sign right here on the southwest entrance that says, Brigham Young University, the world is our campus. I immediately had a spiritual experience with that whole notion. What? The BYU, Brigham Young University, believes that the world is its campus. What wonderful things we have here to share with the world. What about the science? I had just been hired as what they called at that time, their title, Family Outreach Scholar. I waited for a year to enter into that position, and I'm glad that they decided to hold that position open. So when I came here, I knew that I would be working with students to help them learn how to take scholarship out to people where they live and work, where they can make application of it in their homes and families, as well as to train other students to do family life education outreach, to be able to take and be transformative, or rather translational with the science, put it into an accessible, digestible format in ways that people who may never have a university background could understand and apply. So I was really rip-roaringly excited about that. But some of you may be scratching your head and wondering what family life education is anyway. Well, let me give you some definitions so that we begin on the same wavelength. Family life education is the practice of equipping and empowering family members to develop research-based, my insertion, but also from Carol Darling, knowledge and skills that enhance well-being and strengthen interpersonal relationships through an educational, preventive, and strengths-based approach. So I like to say that we work upstream before problems become too steeped, and we help people gain knowledge, skills, attributions to help perhaps steer them away, and that we work together with other partners in family serving, including therapists and family casework to help families achieve their potential. A definition that Wally Goddard, my colleague, and I put together, we were concerned about the audience, saying something about both the audience and about the notion that it's different from what happens in the classroom that's on in a traditional classroom, either at high school or in college. So we attach the phrase outreach family life education and say it's any educational activity occurring outside the traditional classroom that is designed to strengthen the relationships in the home and foster positive individual, couple, and family development. I like to say, and in my experience, 12 years as an extension specialist at Auburn University first, and then later on at Montana State University, that we are really womb to tomb people. Anything that a state, which is our broader classroom, needs, that is what we might craft particular content area information in. But here's some common areas like healthy dating, marriage prep, marriage enhancement, parenting, family strengthening, healthy sexuality, family finance, adult development and aging, and much, much more. Delivery methods are very different, very broad, and very numerous. For example, classes, workshops, online courses and websites, blogs, social media like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram accounts, podcasts, print materials such as books, newsletters, mass media, videos, television programs, almost any way in which we can reach the public with information. One way that we did this in Alabama, partnering with the Children's Trust Fund, who funds child abuse prevention programs, is to craft trade liners for McDonald's in the state of Alabama. So when you got your Happy Meal and you sat down to eat, you could take a quiz about your parenting IQ. And on the right-hand side of that trade liner, you could get information about parenting, such as use more do's than don'ts. So that was a parenting education vehicle, hopefully that led to some helpful conversations while those Happy Meals were being consumed. In addition to some of what I've told you about what family life education is, it's also a translational family science activity. Here's the process. We extract teachable, science-supported ideas for strengthening relationship in the home from journals, published work of scholars. Then we craft those ideas into significant learning experiences for targeted public audiences. Public audiences are very different than classroom-based audiences. Their motivations are about, I need something to address my personal need. I need something to address my marriage issues. I need some take-home information as to how to interact with my teenager in a more effective way. It's also an important component of public scholarship, specifically for application in the home. So whenever scholar practitioners share theory and research findings, after first translating them for home-based application, they are essentially acting as family life educator scholars. Now, those of us who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints understand the concept of translation. It's very familiar in our history. You'll remember, of course, from the process of translating the Book of Mormon. Joseph never fully and completely has articulated exactly how the process took place, except what people saw and heard as he went through those important processes. But he had gold plates written in Reformed Egyptian, language that was foreign to him. He went through a translational activity. The Lord granted him tools in order to make that translational activity possible. The Urim and Thummim, seer stones, direct revelation, among others, which led to the publication of the Book of Mormon into the English language. I like to liken this process to the family life education translation process. Our research and theory constitute our raw materials for that are in published journals, that are scholarly books that can be taken, those teachable ideas. That's the translational activity. Once you have those raw materials handy, results in the translation of taking those teachable ideas into a significant learning experience that we call family life education. And as we've seen, it could be methods anywhere. There's so many methods, just how to expand our reach is necessary to get those teachable, science-based ideas out to our people. Well, here's some examples that I'd like to share with you of bringing the science of healthy marriage and family to our homes, to our personal families, our relationships. I'm going to draw from examples that I've done. I'm going to perhaps surprise some SFL faculty with examples that I happen to admire, many of which could be offered. And I'm also going to brag on a little bit of my students as well. Well, first of all, we have different categories. The first of which is what I call comprehensive family life education prevention programs. Before coming to BYU in 1994, Montana reformed welfare. 2 years before the federal policy, which the acronym is PERORA, if you can get a mouthful around that, to reform welfare, and that was signed by President Bill Clinton at that time. Montana was 2 years ahead of it, but they created a program called FAME, Families Achieving Independence in Montana. That was what they called their public policy. Some of our comprehensive family life education programming is tied directly or indirectly to bringing forth and making public policy work. EduFame is the program because we thought, well, FAME, it's fine if we have that public policy, but we also need some transition time for people who have been on public assistance for some time to transition from public assistance to self-reliance. So in cooperation with the various state agencies in the state of Montana, we crafted EduFame, which stands for Educating Families to Achieve Independence in Montana. EduFame is a collaborative effort between state and local agencies, but it's also a interdisciplinary effort that drew upon the backgrounds of 10 different discipline specialists and faculty members at Montana State University, as well as bringing in people who would evaluate the program, its effectiveness, both at the macro level and at the micro level. At the micro level, those programs were offered educationally based on family need. At the beginning of FAME, the first thing that families coming off of public assistance would do is to meet with a FAME coordinator, and they would complete this, what was called a family investment agreement, where they indicate, here's what the kinds of things we need to learn in order to move from self-reliant or reliance on the government, reliance on welfare, to reliance or self-reliance, to adopt a more self-supporting lifestyle. And so families actually chose from a various menu of the educational opportunities that were there. From that list, families would meet, usually, the parents, moms and dads, or moms only, or whoever happened to be on public assistance, would meet with somebody pictured here, which is one of our EduFame educators, a master's trained person with considerable experience working with limited resource families. She's 100% in this case, and this is Jackie Roberts, who's pictured here, who actually got her master's in MFT over at North Dakota State. She was joined by a program aide, somebody who had actually lived a life on public assistance, understood the needs, the values, the difficulties, the barriers that individuals in these particular demographic groups would be facing or could face. One of the big questions we always ask about family life education and the individual programmatic efforts is, does it work? Is there evidence that this really makes a difference? We found that with EduFame, evaluated by our chief evaluator, Tim Duncan, found that improved employment and income was part of this, improved empowerment for employment, decided that I can actually go out and get a job because my self-confidence has improved and my sense of job skills has improved psychological well-being, job readiness, and family resource management skills, such as knowing how to live on limited funds, knowing how to manage nutritional issues on limited funds. You know, you can spend your wad on your food pretty quickly if you're focusing on prepared foods. But if you understand how to use raw materials, you can really live rather inexpensively as we would apply that sort of family resource management skills. Participants said, when we would ask them, we had a random sample of 34 participants who were randomly selected, and then we did qualitative open-ended interviews with them and wanted to probe what we call transformative learning. This idea that people, not only do they get a skill set, but they're actually are seen as different people by persons in their environment. It's not just about learning parenting, but they actually become different people, is what the adult education notion of transformative learning is about. Here's a couple of representative quotes from this program. I have to say I'm more confident about myself. I spend more time doing things with my children. I have better communication with my whole family. Another person said, I respect myself more and I have more hope for the future because before I was always depressed and always mad. Now I have something to look forward to every week because it's really hard to find jobs around here. They just keep my hopes up. And before I was really depressed and now I have more to look forward to. Online family life education is actually a more recent development. We know that the World Wide Web actually was made available. If I have my years correct, in 1993, it became more available for the public to actually begin to use. And so we have some emphases in online family life education. This fine-looking fellow here is Robert Hughes, a close colleague of mine, going back now about 33 years. Bob did a wonderful article where he defined online family life education. He said, we define online family life education as any educational outreach effort that is primarily delivered via the internet and intentionally facilitates individual and family well-being by using online technologies that include programmatic educational strategies or structure. Forever Families is one of effort here that began at BYU back in 2002. When I was hired at BYU in 2000, in August 2000, one of the assignments I was given was to create a website that would be organized around the themes of the proclamation and to make that available so we could win friends for Brigham Young University, for the proclamation, and for the science-supported proclamation principled ideas and ideals that we could communicate with the world now that we have internet technology. A lot of very forward-thinking persons here in the School of Family Life were thinking about that because, you know, in 1993, there were people who were pretty much naysayers saying, you know, this will last for about a year and then the internet's just going to go away. And we know how malpredictive they were. Forever Families, if you haven't visited the site, this is what it looked like when it was first created back in 2002. It provides practical, scholarly, and faith-based educational information to individuals, married couples, and families of all faiths. It launched, as I mentioned, 2002. At that time, it was announced it's coming forth in church news and various media outlets around the country, as well as cross-listed at a number of websites. My graduate student, Brent Steinley, at the time, was really web savvy, notwithstanding it was a fairly new technology, and her husband, Josh Steinley, worked for a web company. The three of us together approached Jim Harper and said, you know, we really ought to build this site empirically, find out what our intended audience really wants to learn, And we want to make this audience, this resource broader than just Latter-day Saints. We want to have it appeal to an interfaith worldwide audience. And so that's how we developed it. Initially, during our very first stage, what we call a pre-implementation stage, we visited with 6 different focus groups of different demographic backgrounds and probed with them what this website should look like. Now, they weren't reacting from just from a blank slate, but we first created a prototypical website so that they could sort of have something to react to. So we had a lot of very interesting responses. For example, our prototypical site looked as in the same way. If you're in SFL 200, take the proclamation class, what we used to call the proclamation class, and it's blended scholarly and sacred material all in one particular chapter. That's the prototypical approach that we shared with our people. But we had some people who said, I don't care what Gordon Hinckley thinks. I care what God thinks. And colleague Russ Crane said, you know, you ought to craft a particular area and just call it Latter-day Saints perspective. So that's what we did. So we took that out of the scholarly pieces, which are a main and an extended approach, extended longer version of that science-based information, and kept the Latter-day Saint view separate because our visitors, who are 95% Latter-day Saint, will want to know what their church leaders say about these particular topics that are identified. This model here of evaluation comes from the work of Fran Jacobs and Heather Weiss, who at that time were at Harvard. This is a long-standing, very influential evaluation, 5-tier evaluation approach. And we did the website pre-implementation, but then we also were interested, who's using the site? How many people are coming to the site? How do they experience the site at tier 3? What can we learn about how satisfied they are with the site? And tier 4 and tier 5 would await later evaluation. So we collected data for 2 months on this site, and all the visitors were encouraged to complete an online survey, and the survey was assessed views of the site attractiveness, content usefulness, and ease of use, as well as knowledge gains, attitude change, intentions to do things differently, and whether they felt the site met their needs. We also asked them, what do you like about the site? What could be improved? And also if they had any intention about using the materials, what their plans were. Here's what we found in terms of the utilization area. Our first year, we had over 35,000 unique visitors. And visitors came from all over the world, 50 of them. And you can see the total visits and page views there. We did another year-long evaluation in 2005, and we found that the number of unique visitors had increased. We repeated that similar kind of evaluation, but just focused only on 1 month, and found that in 1 month we were getting over nearly 21,000 unique visitors, which is an average of 739 today. We have not yet conducted an additional analysis after 2 additional iterations, but that will be something maybe someone would like to do, maybe for their next thesis, for example. Here's what we found with regard to visitor satisfaction, and as you can see the numbers there is very positive views about how this website was experienced. So the implications seem to come from there, because at that time, people were just developing websites, thought it was way cool. It was new enough technology. Nobody was really thinking seriously about whether or not it was working for people. Very few evaluations of particularly family life websites or any kind of websites were being done. It was sort of a wild, wild west of information dissemination, and there wasn't a lot of gatekeeping of that, particularly in terms of the traditional gatekeeping that we used to see in the newspapers. But as everything has gone so much web-based, There's much less of that. That's another issue, but we also said, okay, what we learned from this formative data is that these websites could be useful for family life kinds of things. But we wondered, can this even rival traditional methods? This bringing people in and to sit down with you and sit in a circle and enjoy couple relationship education right there. We addressed that in a follow-up study, which I'll get to in just a bit. But right now, I just wanted to show you what Forever Families looks like today. You can go into there at foreverfamilies.byu.edu. I won't take you there because you can see that. You can look it up and do a little bit of perusing in there. But there's 8 different subject matter areas that are there in marriage, in family challenges, in strengthening families, in parenting, many, many different areas. And you'll see there across the top, we have places where you can see what the recent additions are. The cool thing about the recent additions is that it reflects some of the revolution that's taken place in the School of Family Life since 2018. And here it must needs give a tribute to my dear friend and colleague, Julie Haupt, who, as she came in and established a writing program for the School of Family Life, one of the things that she and I also partnered to do was to allow 315 students in the school in those writing classes to have the option of writing for Forever Families or Family Perspectives, which is more of the research journal, or both. And so that they get a chance to speak out both sides of their mouth, in effect, and translationally, and on the other hand, to the scholarly audience. There are some really fun articles there you'll want to check out. One is by my niece, and I have to say, Allie Stites. Sorry, I had to include that. She's my dear niece. Good student, I bet. I bet some of you have had her. Anyway, there's a secondary question of this, which is also a corollary question that we were wondering about when we first launched Forever Families. And maybe some of you are thinking, well, do people really go to the web to get relationship enriching sorts of information anyway? Well, my good friend and colleague, Brian Doss at the University of Miami, had a graduate student who went in and did some exploring and found that between 2010 and 11, October, there were more than 3.8 million unique visitors to the 10 most popular self-help relationship website. That seems kind of high, doesn't it? Well, you want to have another eye-popping kind of a number? Well, my graduate student, Tom White, I gave him the assignment, let's go check out the 8 most popular help-seeking websites, and let's see what we find. Now, you can do the math there, 6.89 million unique visits to those sites. So increasingly, the web is being seen as an instrument, as a resource where we can get information. There is a call that I would exhort all persons who are relationship education, family life education, at all oriented in that way, to contribute the science-based, reliable information out to the web. Because it doesn't matter, lots of different things can be out there. Some of them credible, some of them incredible, some of them downright harmful. And so if you're a family life educator, practitioner, and you understand the science, the opportunities are really ripe here to make a difference. And we'll say more about that in just a bit. Step 2 of the web-based family life education involved trying to see what actually would happen from a summative perspective. So you'll remember tiers 1 through 3 is more of the formative kinds of things that you do with a website. Tiers 4 and 5 have to do with short and long-term outcomes. So we did a comparative experimental study of web-based and traditional marriage education. Now, our study was one of the very first to ever do a randomly controlled trial comparing web-based and traditional marriage education. It is still, to my knowledge, the only study that takes a singular curricula and just puts it, one in a traditional format and the other in a web-based format, and then compares them, also using a control group. So part of what drove this idea of reaching out further to a web-based audience is that the traditional programs are notoriously underattended. So we want to increase both the range and the frequency of these formats. We've learned from the literature that self-directed formats can be helpful, and previous evidence up to this time had suggested those who work in mental health were having success doing web-based delivery in their interventions. So we reasoned that perhaps online marriage and relationship education would be helpful. We did this study here in Utah Valley, where we had 100 couples recruited through media channels and randomly assigned them to a traditional, to a website, and to a control group. Then they completed measures from the Relate survey that dealt with different aspects of marital dynamics, and we assigned them to 6 weeks of intervention, 6 two-hour sessions for the traditional, and 6 weeks of reading and activities for the internet team, the internet group, and then there was the waitlist control group who would do nothing other than whatever they were doing already to enrich their relationship. So the findings actually show that the treatment group, either treatment group, improved in comparison to the control group, and there wasn't a significant difference between the Forever Families group or the traditional. There were differences. The traditional was always a little better, but it wasn't statistically different between those two. So we concluded from this sample, anyway, that maybe websites can actually rival the traditional interventions. So for this audience, the science of healthy marriage can be reliably shared in person or the internet on the same material. Maybe there isn't a traditional program nearby for us to attend. Maybe we live in Scobie, Montana, where I have visited a number of times, where there aren't very many resources up there, except the internet, in order to make some connections there. Just to show you these means, for those of you who like to see cool in-color lines, and compared to our internet group here, the internet traditional compared to our control group. This is on the measure of empathic communication. This one is about relationship satisfaction, and this one is on flooding, this aspect of getting overwhelmed when you're dealing with an issue that has some conflict. Well, this happened to use John Gottman's material, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. 7 Principles, sorry. That's the Covey material. Hi, Stephen. No, you didn't do that. No, the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. We took his writings, made it web-friendly, and also made it traditional workshop-friendly. And John was well aware of this, and he sent me an email after I sent him an abstract about how this went and what we found. And he says, "Dear Steve, wow, what an honor that you've used my methods in your research. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your sending me this abstract. Your work is truly fascinating. Please keep in touch with me." Now, John and I have a little bit of a history together. We had a 3.5-hour conversation on an airplane from Kansas City to Salt Lake City, and the topic, marriage education. And it was a great 3.5 hours. So got to know him a little bit. All right, extending the reach of family life education. I'm going to say just something very briefly about the marital intervention research that I have done. But I also want to pay respect to my great colleagues in the CREATE project, Couple Relationships and Transition Experiences. This is a nationally based, randomly selected representative sample of early married couples. I happen to have an instrument in there that Dr. Jeff Larson and I put together, Initially, it was in the Relate inventory. Later on, became part of the Create for 2 or 3 waves of its data collection. And we generated a few studies, 2 of them last year. I'm going to mention one just briefly. There was a marital intervention study. And one thing that we had found is that we wondered, okay, how many people, how many early married couples are actually participating in marriage interventions? That's something that's never been determined, and certainly not at a national level. We found that 2 of 5, or 38.3% of early married couples in the United States participated in any form of intervention. And the 4 that we assessed in this instrument included traditional, in-person, which is class or community workshop, self-directed, or counseling. All interventions were seen as helpful in change-producing, but especially counseling. Most participation in this sample is seen at the premarital level. Now, this idea about premarital counseling resonated with me a lot, and largely because it has to do with this person who's pictured next to me as we entered our early marriage. We had an accidental marriage preparation experience. Meg Hoops, who was a professor of marriage and family therapy, I took her marriage and family therapy class, and she gave us a relationship development assignment that we were to go out on a date with somebody, but we were to go to 5 sessions of counseling. And during that time, get to know them and that sort of thing. Now, it could be anybody, roommate, brother, sister, mother, but I immediately thought of women that I knew. And I asked one woman who I was dating pretty intently, and we broke up that weekend. I asked another gal, and I went to go pick her up, and she didn't show up. And her roommate says, she's sick. No. So I go home, and I'm quite frustrated. I say to my roommate, Dale, what am I going to do? I got to do well in this class. And he said, why don't you ask Barbara Smith? Now, Barbara was a graduate of this program when it was called CDFR, Child Development and Family Relations. And so I called her up. We'd already been out on a date once. And I called her up and asked her, would you do this with me? That's a little bit of a high-risk gig, isn't it? To go to 5 counseling sessions with somebody that you're really not all that tight with. But she agreed, for probably equally scientific reasons as me. And so off we went to 5 counseling sessions. The first one we were assigned to go out on a date, and it was a very long date. But that weekend we ended up going to have lunch at her grandparents, and her dad was in town. 2 of her brothers and their wives were in town, and grandma and grandpa, of course, lived there. And we had our first kiss. It was a busy weekend. All love stories are beautiful. But that story I've just told you is my favorite. Well, how about televised family life education? This is another format of reaching out to a quite broad universe with science-supported information, proclamation principle. Well, a number of years ago, back in 1998, there was a group of people prior to my getting here, BYU Television, the college, School of Family Life, all were talking together about, we really ought to do a TV show that we can, again, build friendships outside the university, reach out to the broader community with science-supported ideas that are there to bless families. And so they came up with this idea. And so in addition to creating a website when I got here, I was given the assignment, oh, by the way, you need to work with BYU Television and get on and see how we can pull together a television show. And so, well, it took a little while for that to happen. There were a couple of starts and stops and that sort of thing. But eventually, this group, this planning group, BYU Television, And then we were asked to, Julie Haupt was on this committee, Susie Olson, Roper, and Lloyd Newell, and then myself, and I chaired this content development committee. We got together and talked about what would these episodes look like? What would they be based on? Now, initially what we did, we took these, we went to the books that we were already using on campus, the Strengthening Our Families books that were taught in SFL 100, the Family Life Education class. And we pulled from those kinds of things, the concepts and principles we wanted to incorporate in this television show in some way. And so that's what we did. And we extracted the content, then we sent it off to script writers. The script writers wrote up the material. Very high-powered, award-winning director, Blair True, was hired to direct all of this process, who had a gift that just went beyond anything we could have hoped for. Anyway, we ultimately called it Real Families, Real Answers. The episodes are based on sound scholarship, but in addition to that, they're also based on leading-edge instructional design principles. For example, each episode opens with sort of a man on the street out getting information from people that are just passing by on matters that are important to most of the viewers, asking those kinds of questions. It would start there, and then we'd bring families together, bring scholars who both from BYU and outside the university to give expert points of view. And then we also had real families. That's part of the name of the show. Real families who would give their perspectives about this information, about what the episode happened to be. And 600 families actually applied via the internet to participate, from which about 32 families were selected. Then the final stage, before we went to filming, was Blair True and I looking at these families and their backgrounds and matching them with the subject matter information we wanted to take to them and take to the broader world. And the big work was done by the director and the camera people who traveled all over the country, from New York to Alaska, from everywhere. We didn't want anybody to look just like Wasatch Front people. These are a diversity of couples, families from all over the country. So we did a little bit of an audience reaction study about this, and Sage Erickson, one of Dr. Hawkins' former graduate students, had some free time while she was doing her internship over in Colorado, where she could help me collect some data that we collected online. And nearly all who have taken the episode surveys, and it's limited to those who actually take it, strongly agree that the episodes are interesting, useful, and enjoyable. And most agree or strongly agree that the episodes made them think of things they didn't know about, led them to reconsider their former attitudes, and decide to do things differently. The other aspect of reaction came from Diana Simmons, who worked at that time with BYU Broadcasting, but to get a sense of what the viewers were actually saying via phone lines that would come in to BYU television. And she wrote to me, "We have had tremendous positive response to the series from viewers around the country and have not only found programs engaging and helpful, but who are anxious to share Real Families, Real Answers with their family and friends, either through a rebroadcast or on DVD. In fact, the most frequent question we receive about the series is, where can I get a copy? You want to know where you can get a copy? Deseret Book and Siegel Book have been carrying copies there since 2014. It's also available online at BYU Television. I'm going to skip over these clips in the interest of time, but this clip, if you go to, I'm just going to click to this, but I won't, well, maybe I will play it anyway. We're just going to shorten some things that we do. This is the
Coming up on Real Families, Real Answers.
The flow of contemporary family life is towards less connection, less meaning.
Parents are losing touch with what their children are actually doing, and we're losing those kids.
individual or societal problems either begin in or end with the family.
I love you all.
Every day isn't going to be a picnic, but on the days that it's not, you're committed to the promise that you made.
People think of love as this magic that just happens. I don't think so. I think it's something you work for.
So therefore, you get an idea of what the opening part of an episode sounds like. I will skip over the other clip that comes from our good friend and colleague, Scott Stanley, because we are starting to run out of time and I need to find out how to get myself back there. There we are. I like to call this a parable of the puppy. Go into your marriage episode 2, and you'll be able to find out. That'll give you something to think about.
Diane.
Maintaining a strong marriage is more than simply puppy love, much more. And Dr. Stanley uses a simple metaphor to explain years of marital research.
I often put up a picture of my little dog named Odie when he was a puppy. And I just make this point to couples. When you see that little puppy face, I want you to notice something. You fall in love with the front end of the puppy, but every puppy has a back end. And that is exactly the way marriage is. Some people are choosing to be in a relationship, they're getting married, and they're thinking there's no back end. There's no difficult part of this relationship. And they're just focused on what I call the front end of the puppy. But every puppy has a back end. And a lot about how marriages are going to do over time involves two things. One is preserving and protecting that front end and that part that you're so connected with, but managing the back end of the puppy well. Because if you don't manage that part of the relationship well, the front end can't be cute enough, can't lick you enough, can't be happy enough to see you, because everything just smells.
All righty, I'm going to skip over a few things because I want to stay toward the end of the hour, but just to say there's other ways for us to share the science of marriage and family life with the world. Part of the way we do this here at BYU is to train students to be family life educators and to carry that message out to them. So SFL 498 and MFHG 625 are two of those boot camp classes, is what I like to call it, because we learn to build the bear there. Build it from the start, build a comprehensive program, build a website, whatever that opportunity might have. Here's a couple of examples, recent ones. The Sexual Mythbusters is a personal favorite of mine, developed by a group of undergraduate students. And one of my graduate students, Shalise McAllister, who's now Shalise McAllister Luke, developed a blog called Find Your Fish, all about mate selection principles and dating and trying to navigate the dating wilderness. And she does it with a lot of tongue in cheek. Single at the time, now married with a cute little daughter. We've also done some professional training here at BYU, where we were given the opportunity by the developers of PrEP. Scott Stanley is one of those developers who you just saw in that interview, allowed us, Alan Hawkins and I, to train our students who are enrolled in family life educational classes to take the prevention and relationship enhancement facilitator training. PrEP is one of the leading programs in the world for taking good relationship science principles out to people where they need it, and can improve their relationships as a result, including having more positive communication and other aspects of the relationship. Since 2013, we've trained 223 students in prep, 130 in the extracurricular setting, 93 in class, and for a number of these students, they've been able to go out and deliver that same program out to the community. We also have sponsored other family life education training opportunities. Media articles are also a part of what we can do to take the science out to the world. I did an article in Montana called Family Matters, and which was a bi-monthly news byline. It was a blast to do, carried in about 13 newspapers statewide, as well as in some of the regional newspapers. And there was a brother in Helena, a man in Helena who liked to save the articles and pass them on to his kiddos. It was an MFT, marriage family therapist in Billings, who had couples come to his practice after reading one of my articles because they realized they needed help. We have colleagues here in the School of Family Life that I just wanted to mention are doing some really off the charts family, translational, science kinds of things. If you go to Sarah Coyne's website, and you just see it listed there, you'll come across this media literacy education, and you'll get a sense of videos that she has sent out and had other people develop them out to the high schools, so they get a sense of what media literacy looks like. Also, these newsletters, informational newsletters, where they can get the high points and concepts about how to be media literacy savvy with our cell phones and other aspects. We've got another famous woman here, Laura Video Walker, I remember being in a devotional listening to her talk about helicopter parenting, but most recently she's has been in as a kind of a guest editor and author in the August 2020 Ensign, and wrote an article there with one of our graduate students, Meg Jankovic, and about how to teach children about sex. So what about you? Are you a translational family scholar educator or want to be? Well, in courses about family matters where you've taken, or in studies that you've conducted, if you have had the thought that people everywhere really need to learn about this, and you know your Venn diagrams, the if, then, and all that sort of stuff. If you have also had the thought, I want to take this knowledge to others, even the world, then in your heart you may be a translational family scholar educator. In conclusion, the world is our campus. It needs the science of healthy marriage and family life to flourish, for it to flourish. Be translational about what you study and learn. Find ways to share it in tweetable, pithy ways, easily understood by everyday people. And then third, hone the skill of being an ambassador of teachable, scientific truths that bless marriages and families of the world. And it's my prayer that we will engage in this great and glorious work. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Okay, we have time for a couple of questions.
Somebody on the chat wanted to know why traditional classes are unattended, or underattended. Sorry.
The question is, why are traditional classes unattended? That's a puzzlement to me too, because a lot of the research, such as done by Dr. Hawkins in his meta-analytic research, shows that people do benefit. There's clear benefits in communication and relationship satisfaction. I suspect part of it is a matter of time and the time-starved culture that we live in today. And so I think that's why we see an increase in audiences actually going to the web. What can I learn on the web? My belief is that also the web as an instrument of relationship enhancement is really a very active part of the future of family life education. It will never replace the high touch, high connection, having eye contact and feeling the warmth of a caring, personable facilitator, instructor in your presence. But fewer people are able to engage, the 12 to 20 or the 8 to 10 or however many hours of commitment that sort of intervention usually entails for it to generate reliable changes in their lives. Yes. Hi. Hi, Claire.
Hello.
I know you.
Yes. What's the best way to get involved with family life education after graduation?
Excellent. The question is, what's the best way to get involved with family life education after graduation? I would be checking with county extension agents in wherever you happen to settle. They may not be doing family life education themselves, but they often are persons who are connected and know where the opportunities, meaning gaps and places to actually serve are. I would also be checking looking around on Indeed, looking there and just do a lot of different search terms, not just family life education, even though if you're a purist, you may want to start there, but there's prevention, there's parenting education, youth, all sorts of things may get you into the doorway. As I mentioned early on, family life education is really about womb to tomb stuff. And so maybe you get in on something that you're not terribly knowledgeable about and build that capacity. The other part is to get trained in a curriculum. Parenting, marriage, find one of those curricula, get trained, and that becomes part of your calling card as you reach out to people. This is what I can do for your organization. Not only can we do this, but I can also build a bear, I can build a program for you, and then we can carry this out with supportive websites and those kinds of things. Yes?
Every family is different, but if you could give one of your little tweets of knowledge, what is the one thing you want every family in the world to know about family life?
Oh, wow. Let me scratch that through. I bet I know who you are too. We'll talk about that later. But I really love the hymn in our church, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There is beauty all around when there's love at home. Now, if you look at the home, if you look at that particular hymn, we're told about the fruits of love, but we're not told about the process of love. But we can find out what is loving and meaningful from our partners, from our family members. Sit down with a youngster for 5 to 10 minutes. You get a sense of how best to communicate love with that youngster in ways that that youngster, that partner, finds are loving to them. I think if you do anything else, that's a good place to start. One last question.
Okay. This last question is, how can those of us who are far away from BYU connect with or engage with the academics doing the research to translate their research into our websites and local communities?
Excellent question. Well, we have some translational family science stuff going on already. I see Dr. Hal Boyd is in the audience, is sitting there. Hi, Hal. And Hal he coordinates two aspects of some of this public scholarship aspect that involves students and which are published work. Forever Families is one of those. Family Perspectives is another one. And the way preliminary to them writing for either of those formats, they need to be writing in an understandable way that most people can grasp. So that's, I think, one way of at least getting at the subject matter that may interest our questioner there. But I would check out all things on BYU television. I would really love to see the college and the School of Family Life do another Real Families, Real Answers. I think 12 years since that first went on the air, and it aired at 61 public television stations around the country, as well as being worldwide on BYU television. That's a really strong way to outreach to the broader community. I hope we can do it again with updated science-based information that reaches the citizens of the world.
Well, with gratitude, Dr. Duncan, we'd like to present you with this thank you for your preparations for this lecture, the Virginia F. Cutler Honored Faculty Lecture to Dr. Stephen F. Duncan. We will have a reception in the foyer just outside this room. For those of you who are watching online, I'm sorry we haven't invented the technology yet to get our brownies to you. We will conclude this night then with a prayer for Dr. David Dollarhide.
Our eternal Father, we love thee, and we love thy Son, our Savior. We're grateful for the opportunity we've had to be here, to hear one of thy children, one of thy servants, Dr. Steve Duncan, share with us the ways that he and others that have worked with him and students that have worked under his direction have been a blessing to many families in the earth. And we are grateful for his service, his long and productive caring career, as he has devoted so much time and energy to blessing students and to blessing families throughout the earth. We pray that thy Spirit will guide our thoughts, that as we think of the things that Dr. Duncan shared with us, that we might consider ways that we can, in our own sphere, reach out and bless families and couples and individuals. Help us to have thy guidance and direction in all of our efforts to minister to and to bless others. We are grateful for this chance to gather, grateful for our lives, our freedoms, and grateful for all those who worked so hard to put this evening together. Grateful for all that we enjoy. Pray thy blessings to be with us as we try to strengthen our own families and also reach out to bless others. We pray in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.